What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Behind the Frames. This is episode number two. I almost said number one. If you haven't already heard or seen episode number one, I'll link it down below. It's also live on my channel. I sat down with an awesome photographer friend of mine that I've known for quite a while, Felicia Fullwood, and we had a great conversation about growing up as creators, the things that we learned, and the down times, the good times, and really just everything that made us who we are today. And I think that's kind of what inspired this episode. I really want to talk about kind of the top three things I wish I knew before I picked up a camera. It is December 22nd, and Christmas is right around the corner, so happy holidays to everybody. I hope everybody got their Christmas shopping done. So yeah, eat some great food, spend time with family, and it's also the day before this crazy storm that everybody's talking about, or actually it might be tonight. It's like 11:30, so stay safe, travel safe. Don't drive if you don't have to, honestly, but I know everybody's going to be traveling because it's the holiday weekend. So yeah, happy holidays, and let's jump into the show. All right, so the number one thing I wish I would have known before I picked up a camera is don't pick a niche right away. Don't worry about picking a niche. I think that's advice that's thrown around quite a bit, to pick a niche when you pick up a camera, but I think that's terrible advice. I think when you pick up a camera, you should be focused on soaking up as much knowledge as you possibly can. I think if you pick a niche, it might cause you to be too laser focused and not really open-minded to opportunities that come. Like if you're a photographer and somebody asks you to do video for them, I think you should 100% do video, and vice versa. I think you should just be focused on learning as much as possible, trying as many different forms of your creativity as you can. It's going to make you a more well-rounded creator, but it's also going to help you discover what your niche is rather than just choose it. The niche is going to come. You're going to figure that out over time. I'll tell you right now, if this is the first year that you're making content, your niche is 100% going to change. Like, you may have an idea of exactly what you want to do in this well thought out plan. I can promise you it's going to change. Don't worry so much about it. Just worry about learning and building up a network. Worry about that more. All right, number two, and probably the most important lesson that I've learned, is community over following. They are not the same. You could have 100,000 followers, but you may really only have access to 20% of those people because they actually see your stuff. A large portion of those followers may have just only followed you through passing, whether it's like scrolling on TikTok or Instagram Reels. I think today there's a lot of opportunity to build huge followings because, social media platforms are starting to focus more on creators, which is great, and that's phenomenal. Never underestimate the power of 10 true fans. I think the number one most important thing anybody can do in 2023 and onwards is build relationships at a small scale. Treat it like a small business. If you see somebody that's, constantly liking your stuff, reach out, whether that's a video message, a voice memo, whatever, just saying thank you, or even asking them what they would like to see. People want to feel like they're a part of something, and you can give them access to that. And I think there's a lot of power in that, and building that community in the future will 100% pay off. Send messages, send voice memos, send video messages, be collaborative, build relationships, and network, because it may not seem like it's worth it in the moment, but I can promise you 5 years down the line, when you want to monetize what you're doing, it's going to mean something. All right, last but not least, and I know I said number two was the most important, but I might actually think that this is the most important from a creative point of view. Number three, don't let social media influence the content you create. This is something that we talked a lot about in episode number one, Felicia and I. And we talked a lot about, burnout and this thing that we as creators do where we make massive strides to create content that we don't really want to make, but is to us feels like a necessary evil to get to where we want to go. There's a portion of that in the normal work environment where you're not always going to love what you do. So there are just some things you have to do just for the sake of doing it and getting to where you need to go in life. But I think creativity, being in a creative career, I think that's a slippery slope of like, okay, I'm just going to create all this crazy influencer trend stuff because it's going to get me the following that I want to get. It's a slippery slope. It's going to lead to burnout. The only reason I say this is because this is from experience. I've done a ton of things I never really wanted to do or was passionate about. I really bit off more than I can chew multiple times, doing these massive series videos, almost like TV show like on YouTube. And I mean, even on TikTok, for example, like during COVID, I had a moment where I popped off on TikTok, and that was great. I made it to like 45,000 followers in like a month, and it was wild and it was crazy and super cool. And the numbers started flowing in, and I was like, okay, I'm going to create more of this crap that I don't actually care about. And I did that, and then I was all of a sudden looking back, and I was like, okay, I did that, but at what cost? Like, how do I pivot this following to what I really love? And I think the reality there is if you're on that pathway for too long of doing what you don't really want to do, I think you start to lose sight of what it is that you really want to do. And then when the time comes for you to do that thing, you have this bit of identity crisis of like, okay, I actually don't really know what I like to do. I've just been doing all these trends and stuff that works on social media, and I've lost sight of like my artistic vision. And that's something that's happened to me multiple times, and that's why I don't think it's worth it to jump on these trends as much as people do. I think, there's a time and a place. I think every once in a while when you're on social media, there's, moments where you can make it work for you and not be so far off of what you actually do. I talk about it like doing like one for them, two for you, one for the algorithm, two that, feeds your soul and inspires you to create more. But the overall summary of what I'm saying is, don't let the algorithm drive your creative vision. I feel like this was a really fast episode. Maybe I have a bonus tip. Oh, let's have a fun one here. The camera company you go with when you first started out does not matter at all. I think there's like a lot of pressure to like pick the perfect camera system right off the bat. And actually, let me spin this and have a little lesson behind this, because I think this is also important. If you have the money to buy the best of the best, state-of-the-art, newest camera, 2023 model, whatever, I almost recommend that you don't do it. I think when you're first starting out as a creative, I think there's power in learning to create with what you have. And if you exposed yourself to the best of the best equipment, I think you almost, you lose a lot of opportunity to learn lessons, because you're already exposed with what works in most scenarios. But if you sort of just expose yourself to just the bare minimum, whether that's just, a cheaper camera, cheaper lenses, it's going to teach you how to like problem solve. Your camera may not be able to execute what you want it to execute. So how can you make it work? I think working through that is an extremely important skill set that will come back later on in the creative career. So don't focus so much on the equipment when you first start out. And also, going back to the funny part of this, like I said, the camera company, the camera system that you choose is pretty irrelevant when you first start out. There are obviously levels to these companies, to these organizations, whether it's Nikon, Sony, Pentax, Canon, whatever, but it doesn't really matter to you. And it shouldn't matter to you. It's a lot like cars when you think about it. A lot of people argue that Ford is better than Chevy and Chevy is better than Dodge or whatever. It's different pretty much every state that you go. And it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. None of it matters. They all have their flaws. They all have their, their tiffs and their things. And they all have their very great advantages. From my experience, this is something that developed over time. I started off with Nikon. My experience is that Nikon is a phenomenal camera for photographers. But then I started doing more video, and from my experience, Nikon wasn't cutting it. I didn't see Nikon really being very innovative in the video space. The people that I saw doing that was Sony. So I knew Sony was where I wanted to be. So that's why I chose Sony, and that's where I'm at right now. Will that change in the future? Maybe, maybe not. I've been doing this for 12 years, and I'd say I'm pretty happy with what Sony's doing. The moment that any of these companies stop innovating and stop trying to build better things, then I will probably go to whoever is. That's 12 years into this that I'm saying that. And if you're in your first year of creating content, don't worry so much about it. Just pick something. I think when I first started out, I picked Nikon because it was like a Black Friday deal at a Walmart or something, and it came with 2 lenses. That's the only reason. That's all I was going on. And I used that camera for the first 5 years of creating content, and I won contests and money. I had probably some of the biggest successes within those first 5 years with a camera that could really just do the bare minimum. And I learned a ton, and that made me a better creator today. All right, everybody, I think that's where I'm going to cut it. 15 minutes in, very short episode. Thank you all for listening. I am planning on having more guests on. I don't want this podcast to be a solo podcast all the time. There's obviously going to be topics that I want to talk about that I'll do a solo episode for, but I want to have more conversations and network, and I want to meet new people. So I have a long list of guests that I plan on inviting on. It's just right now I kind of wanted to bulk up a couple episodes before I start reaching out to some of these people, but you will be seeing that very soon, especially in 2023. I think I'm going to do one more episode before the new year, but until then, I hope everybody has a phenomenal holiday. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music. I think it's on a couple others. And yeah, have an amazing, safe holiday, safe travels, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.